confused by with my other colleagues such as Ricardo Menendez March and Dr. Lawrence Hernandez, but I'm pleased to report that as they're more handsome and better dressed than me, I'm not offended by any sorts of confusion between us. I rise to take a call on the Firearms Prohibition Orders Legislation Bill, and I want to talk a little bit about the kind of genesis. That's right, strong O you say. I want to talk a little bit about the genesis of this, and the genesis of this was, as Mr. Meagers alluded to, yes, it was talked about as a national members bill, but it was a tranche of legislation that was adopted by the then Labour government following, and I'm sure all of us members in the House would agree, which was a very tragic and very senseless attack on March 15. And my colleague, Dr. Lawrence Zunan, rightfully pointed out that we do need to actually center the voices of the people in this. We need to center the voices of the people who've been affected by gun violence. And I think a lot of people have made a point, and a lot of members opposite have kind of talked about a focus on the gangs, right? This bill does actually focus quite strongly on the gangs. A lot of the members' contributions have been about the gangs, but if we're serious about the gangs, how do we actually get rid of the gangs? Well, we get rid of the gangs by creating jobs, but instead this government has pursued fiscal and monetary policies which has pushed unemployment up 4.6%, the highest it's been. If we're serious about getting rid of gangs, we have to invest in police. Instead, we've seen this government making cuts to police. And this is a quote from the Police Association about cuts that are being made to the police, nearly 200 jobs. Quote, "We think this will be a scattergun headcount reduction exercise made in a silo by people who don't understand the work that people do, who they do it for, and who also won't personally be affected by the outcome of the so-called realignment exercise," which is a euphemism of the cuts that are happening around the police. And if we're serious about actually taking action on guns, we have to create environments whereby social inclusion is fostered. This legislation does the opposite. It adds to the layer of stigmatization of people who've already been through a lot. I mean, we've heard a lot about the inquiry in state abuse, about how people who've been abused by the state tend to turn to the gangs for comfort. And I think we need to contend with these actual sociological realities. I mean, some people do join gangs because they're bad people. That's absolutely true. And we should make no excuses for the people who do join the gangs. But there are some people who've joined the gangs because of the trauma that they've experienced in their life, and further compounding trauma and further using the state to further abuse people isn't what's actually going to be a serious anti-crime or anti-gun thing. And we've talked a lot about the potential harassment, and Dr. Duncan Webb has made substantial and quite informed and eloquent contributions about the potential for these warrantless searches to be used against the communities. And I do think that's definitely something that will further compound and further add to the layers of trauma that are already here. So my plea to the members opposite, my plea to all the members across this House actually, is that rather than shouting slogans and actually saying, oh, well, we need to crack down on the guns, we need to deploy the police on the street, we need to execute people or whatever, we actually look to see what's worked overseas. And what's worked is actually fostering inclusion. What's worked is actually funding the police and funding people to actually do the jobs that need to be done so that we actually do make serious work on reducing gangs and reducing the harms that they do. And we actually create jobs and employment opportunities. But instead, we've been going backwards. We've been going backwards under this government. We're seeing beneficiaries stigmatized. We're seeing the overall employment rate cut. And it's really quite sad. I just want to conclude my speech by thanking the Minister for her substantial engagement during the committee of the whole House last night. I was able to take a call, and my colleagues in the Greens were able to take calls, and she did answer our questions in a way that was quite direct and I found inclusive. So thank you.
I wonder if his comment was pointing out that, now I've not found out anything yet, but Lawrence and Ricardo Menendez March are gay. I wonder if that was a reference to he's also gay. If you remember the start of the speech, because there's nothing on his Wikipedia page that points in any direction, but it does feel like it. But also at the same time, he does have his religion set as Catholic.
He's Filipino. Everybody in the Philippines is Catholic.
Oh.
It's literally, you're born, here's your cross and your beads. It's a very common thing over there. It could very well be down to the fact that Lawrence has a very unique dress style. He has a very, very unique dress style. I think it is really interesting, though, that the Greens and the left are putting out there the whole talk about the holistic need to look after the community, how that leads into better conditions to ensure you have less crime, which means less of a foothold for gangs. I mean, it's been said for a really long time. The best thing that any government could have done to weaken gangs in this country would have been to legalize marijuana and take away their power. And it was something that they didn't do when they had the chance, and that falls across both of the parties, like both of the big parties. So yeah, it was, that would have weakened them to a point where other social services helping out, other ways of building community would have stepped in and weakened that power that the gangs have. But it didn't happen. But it's interesting as well that he points out how much the focus is on gangs and creating a villain for the piece to create a narrative for the bill itself. And I get it, like it's an easy way to sell a bill is to have a villain that it makes look bad. But there are a number of people out there, like the Muslim community in Christchurch, who are deeply impacted by what's happened in the past and who have understandable concerns going forward about weapons in the future.
Okay.